Is the Sega Genesis really as good as I remember? There was nothing like the advancement in gaming during the change from 8-bit to 16-bit consoles. The advent of 4th-generation gaming was one of the biggest step changes in video gaming history. Back in the 80s, great consoles like the NES and Sega Master System had some excellent games, but were still quite limited due to their rudimentary graphics and sound. The most impressive games at the time were often still found at your local arcade. When computing power and consumer electronics began to increase during the late 80s, Sega blazed a trail by launching its powerful new system and wowing gamers who demanded more. When I think back to that time, I often ask myself, is it just my own feelings of nostalgia, or was the Sega Genesis really as good as I remember it to be? So join me in this retro gaming boss exploration of this groundbreaking console to answer the question as we look at its amazing games and the impact it had on popular culture and video game history. To start this review, we need to jump into our retro time machine and travel back 36 years to 1989. Back then, the tunes of Milli Vanilli and Madonna were playing non-stop on the radio, and movies like Batman and Indiana Jones were packing the theaters. In gaming, Super Mario Bros. 3 and Tetris were also just released on the 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System. Against this backdrop, the Sega Genesis, also known as the Mega Drive outside of North America, was first launched in Japan in 1988, and later in North America in August of 1989. During the system's reign, it maintained a strong presence with gamers for nearly a decade. While the Genesis wasn't Sega's first home console, it became the company's flagship device, marking the beginning of the 16-bit era in video games and escalating its battle with Nintendo for gaming dominance. The Genesis brought significant advances in graphics and sound, and introduced the public to classic franchises that continue to shape the gaming world today. In this video, we'll take an objective look at just how good the Genesis really was by examining its most important characteristics. We'll begin by checking out some of the system's most iconic games, and then take a look under the hood at the technical specs of the 16-bit powerhouse. And finally, we'll measure its overall impact by comparing it to the competition and assessing its lasting legacy on gaming. So before we dive into it, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is always here for a quick retro gaming break, whenever you need it. I appreciate your support, since it's the only way that YouTube will highlight my videos. Going straight to what matters most, we have to start with the games. The Sega Genesis library contains over 900 titles, with many considered to be masterpieces of their day and age that fueled the console's popularity and longevity. To illustrate the quality and breadth of the Genesis library, I need to highlight a number of standout games that are loved by fans and really showcase the variety and fun experience delivered by the console.
Excellent!
This includes a sampling across different genres, from platformers, shooters, and action titles to RPGs and sports games. The following list is not meant to be taken as the system's best games, however, each one provided a major contribution to the console's appeal and lasting influence. So buckle up as we do a quick speed round to recap some of the remarkable games on the Genesis. Sega's defining mascot, Sonic the Hedgehog, became synonymous with the console itself. The gameplay style offered players a colorful and energetic experience with high-speed, side-scrolling levels filled with loops and jumps in a kinetic environment. The game's bright graphics, fun characters, and iconic soundtrack helped make it an instant classic. Streets of Rage 2. This legendary beat-em-up was a hallmark of co-op player gaming. The game introduced players to a cast of memorable characters, fantastic level design, and intense brawling action. Streets of Rage 2 had an unforgettable soundtrack composed by Yuzo Koshiro, which remains a fan favorite to this day. Phantasy Star IV. This game was far and away the best role-playing game ever made for the console. This title delivered a deep, engaging story alongside stunning visuals and a deep battle system. The game's visual style and narrative tied together previous entities in the Phantasy Star series while remaining accessible to newcomers. Its art direction, world building, and music left a lasting impact on the RPG genre. Contra Hardcore. Known for its over-the-top action and vibrant visuals, Contra Hardcore was a run-and-gun shooter that pushed the Genesis to its absolute limits. With great co-op gameplay, fantastic boss battles, and stunning graphics, it is often thought to be one of the very best action games available on the Genesis. Arcade ports, Altered Beast, Golden Axe, Afterburner 2. One of Sega's greatest assets that it used to drive early adoption of the Genesis was an incredible batch of arcade ports that were exclusive on the console. Sega's launch hype for the Genesis focused heavily on bringing the arcade experience into the comfort of your own home. While the quality of the arcade ports varied from excellent to just so-so depending on the title, Golden Axe, Altered Beast, and Afterburner 2 were all quite good, even if not perfect mirrors of the original arcade experience. Castlevania Bloodlines marked a shift in the Castlevania series from its 8-bit roots to the more powerful 16-bit system. This action platformer was unique because it featured two different playable characters, each with their own abilities, in a quest to stop Dracula's resurrection. The game retained the series' signature dark, gothic atmosphere while offering tight, responsive controls and challenging gameplay. With impressive visuals and a haunting soundtrack, Bloodlines remains another of the most revered action games on the Genesis. Madden NFL 94. was actually released in 1993 as part of the iconic Madden NFL series, which became hugely popular on the console. Madden NFL 94 was particularly notable for introducing features like the NFL license and real player names, which helped cement its place as a sports lover's dream and become one of the top-selling games of the era. The Madden NFL series continues to be a dominant force in sports gaming over the years, and this game helped differentiate the Sega Genesis from the competition.
Set! 20! Green! But!
Shining Force 2 is another RPG entry considered by many to be the best tactical RPG on the system. Shining Force 2 offered a compelling, turn-based strategy experience that offered more depth than many of the action-oriented titles on the Genesis. Players controlled a group of heroes as they embarked on a journey to stop a dark force threatening their kingdom. The game was praised for its accessible mechanics, beautifully designed pixel art, fun combat system, and engaging story. This series would go on to influence many tactical RPGs in the years that followed. Earthworm Jim was an innovative and visually stunning platformer that combined a unique main character, a cartoonish earthworm with a cybernetic supersuit, with challenging gameplay and a quirky sense of humor. Known for its hand-drawn animation and fluid style, Earthworm Jim featured imaginative level design and was praised for its creativity and overall polish, and its bizarre sense of humor which still resonates with fans today. Echo the Dolphin was a unique action-adventure game that combined underwater exploration and puzzle solving. In this innovative title, players controlled a dolphin navigating underwater environments to uncover a mysterious threat. The game felt so different than the other types of genres which preceded it, and heightened the appeal of the console to a broader audience. Street Fighter II Special Championship Edition brought the famous arcade fighting game home to the console, featuring classic characters and intense bare-knuckle one-on-one combat, with crisp graphics and smooth gameplay. It was an unforgettable addition to the Genesis library. Thunder Force 4 was a visually striking, side-scrolling shoot-'em-up, praised for its fast-paced action and impressive graphics. This game showed off the system's ability to create some incredible visual effects, highlighting what Sega's 16-bit Colossus was capable of rendering on screen. Shinobi 3 Return of the Ninja Master delivered thrilling ninja action with its fluid animation, action, and impressive backgrounds, setting it apart with its combination of traditional platforming and ninja combat. And finally, Vectorman offered an innovative 2D platforming experience with its futuristic setting and robot protagonist. What made this one special is its crisp, pre-rendered graphics and dynamic, action-packed gameplay. With such an extensive library and variety of top-notch games, there's no way I could go through all of them in this video, so I'm curious about what you think are the best games on the Genesis. Leave a comment below and let's compare notes. Here's my personal experience from way back in '89. My friends and I were all so excited from the hype leading up to the console's release. When it first came out, we had to settle with playing the demo unit set out at the local JCPenney store. And then when my friend finally got a Genesis of his own, I remember feeling so lucky hanging out and playing the amazing launch titles together. Classics like Altered Beast, Phantasy Star II, Pat Riley's Basketball, and of course, Afterburner 2. Yeah, life sure felt amazing back in those days, especially when we pulled some all-nighters, feeling like a king, passing through the hours guzzling Mountain Dew and powering up with a bunch of cheap frozen pizzas. I gotta say, those were the days.
Power up!
But really, it's actually kind of hard to even explain how awesome it felt when playing these games for the very first time, right at the dawn of the 16-bit era. I had no idea that experience would become history in the making, but I knew for certain that the major improvements in graphics and sound on the Genesis were definitely something to behold. You have to remember that back then, there was nothing retro about this system at all. It was hardcore, state-of-the-art, powerful video gaming technology at its peak. And I'll never forget the sense of wonder I felt during those moments. And would guess that you might also have some fun memories of Sega's remarkable console of your own. So of course, I still come back to the Genesis from time to time for a hit of gaming nostalgia, and honestly I have to say I'm still very impressed with the creativity of many of its games, including the graphics, animation, sound, and gameplay. For 2D gaming, the Genesis has always been such a blast to play, and deserves to be one of every retro gamer's core systems. Now after playing these great Genesis games, I often ask myself, what kind of electronic wizardry was going on under the hood of the console that produced such cool games? The hardware of the Genesis was largely influenced by Sega's famous System 16 arcade board. While not as powerful as the arcade hardware itself, the Genesis featured a Motorola 68000 microprocessor clocking in at 7.6 MHz, with a Zilog Z80 audio controller running at 3.58 MHz. So while this chipset had just a fraction of the capabilities of those found in your modern-day phones, back in '89, it represented a significant leap forward in terms of processing power compared to its contemporaries. This allowed the Genesis to deliver smoother gameplay, big sprites on screen, and some awesome parallax scrolling effects. They all came together to produce way better graphics than the prior generation of consoles. With a color palette of 512 total colors and the ability to display 64 colors on screen at a time, its 16-bit processing architecture offered sharp visuals and smoother animation, giving it an edge over its 8-bit competitors such as the Nintendo Entertainment System. The system was also equipped with 64 KB of RAM and another 64 KB of video RAM, which supported a variety of new graphical effects. The sound was handled by a specialized Yamaha YM2612 chip, producing its hallmark frequency modulation audio. With its distinctive music and sound effects, they became one of the console's most recognizable features. The Genesis even had a stereo audio headset jack on the front, which was quite a fancy feature back in the 80s. The stereo effect really sounded impressive in certain games too. Don't believe me? Put on your headphones now and take a listen for yourself. Additionally, the Sega Genesis boasted a number of peripheral devices that demonstrated Sega's willingness to experiment with new hardware in an effort to expand the capabilities of the console. Among these were backwards compatibility with the 8-bit Sega Master System with its power-based converter, which came in really handy for proud owners of the SMS like me. The Sega CD was a compact disc add-on that expanded the system's audio and graphics capabilities by providing full-motion video and CD-quality soundtracks that resulted in more cinematic gameplay experiences. Sega also offered specialized controllers with unique features like the 6-button joystick and gamepad for enthusiasts of fighting games. And who could forget the ill-fated 32X, which allowed the Genesis to show off 32-bit graphics, albeit with mixed results and a poor reception that sealed its inevitable fate. Out of all the Sega Genesis peripherals, to me, the one that provided the greatest benefits to gamers was the Sega CD, but I'll come back to that one in another video. I've also got to share my personal view about the aesthetic design of the console itself. Before the Genesis, both the NES and SMS had blocky and angular form factors, both those consoles themselves and their controllers. In fact, even older systems like the Atari 2600 and ColecoVision used a similar rectangular, straight-edge form. When the Genesis was introduced, I was immediately blown away with its more organic form and smooth, curved surfaces. The center ring of the console and comfortable, natural shape of the controller seemed light years ahead of the prior consoles from a design standpoint. And the addition of that third button on the controller just opened up so many new possibilities for gameplay and interaction. So while it's easy to overlook this aspect today, back in its time, the Genesis was a gorgeous and futuristic-looking gaming machine. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this content, I've included a playlist in the description below of my other videos that you might also enjoy. So why not check them out and stick around for a while? So there's no doubt the Sega Genesis had a profound effect on the gaming industry in terms of its technical innovations and epic library of games. And in my view, one of its biggest impacts was how it shifted the gaming industry towards a more complex, serious, and mature-themed games. One of the things that drew me toward the Genesis in the first place was how its games were more gritty and intense than many Nintendo titles. Many Genesis titles presented themselves with a real edge. For example, I remember playing the Genesis arcade port of Mortal Kombat, which included actual red blood and the same gruesome fatalities that were pulled straight from the original. By way of comparison, that was something that was actually censored on the Super Nintendo version. So while we might laugh now at how basic this seems, trust me, it was a big deal at the time, and there was actually a lot of controversy in the news about violence in video games, which actually led to the implementation of a video game rating system, similar to what was in place for movies.
Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. When I was dead broke, man, I couldn't picture this.
The popularity of the Genesis also fueled the console war between Sega and Nintendo, the former trying to position itself as the extreme alternative brand through its aggressive advertising campaigns, most notably its buzzworthy blast processing ads, and their Genesis does what Nintendo don't slogan. So say what you will about the marketing gimmicks of those days, but this rivalry helped bring about loads of innovation that was tremendous for gamers, since each company pushed the other to develop new technologies that resulted in better gaming experiences. This fierce competition resulted in further growth of the industry that, in turn, popularized gaming as a mainstream force in entertainment. Sega also did an excellent job increasing the number of third-party developers that signed up to create games for the Genesis. Due to the system's advanced technology, it was able to attract a larger number of third-party developers, leading to its broader and more diverse game library. A final facet of how good the Sega Genesis really was is how it compares to its biggest competition, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, that was released in the US in August of 1991, 2 years after the Genesis. The introduction of the Super Nintendo debuted some new hardware that gave it some advantages that made it a tough competitor, an amazing system in its own right. There's no denying the Super Nintendo featured superior sound capabilities, thanks to its custom-designed audio chipset that introduced Sony's digital signal processor, which created higher fidelity music and sound effects than the Genesis. While the Yamaha chip in the Genesis brought to life some killer soundtracks, especially its hard rock and electronic techno themes, The Super Nintendo is often praised for its clear-sounding, nuanced, and orchestral music. The Super Nintendo also showcased its Mode 7 hardware-accelerated scaling and rotation of background layers, with this additional horsepower giving it a visual edge in games like Super Mario Kart, F-Zero, and Pilotwings. In comparison, the Genesis was also able to produce similar effects. However, this was cleverly done in software rather than natively via hardware. For example, in the epic boss battles in Contra Hard Corps. But in my eyes, these effects on the Genesis somehow never seem to quite be as smooth or fluid as those on the Super Nintendo, even though, I have to say, they still look pretty awesome. I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Both consoles also began pushing the boundaries of real-time 3D graphics by incorporating specialized geometry processor chips on board cartridges, but only on a small number of titles. Virtua Racing on the Genesis was a reasonably good port of the popular arcade game that demonstrated the power of the Sega Virtua processing chip, while Nintendo's 3DFX chip was well known for Star Fox, its brilliant 3D space shooter. Some might argue that the Super Nintendo may have had a slight edge with its game library, featuring some of the most beloved first-party titles ever made, such as The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Super Mario World, and Super Metroid. But as we saw in the earlier recap, many Genesis games were no joke and were also exceptionally good, breaking new ground and showing the world all that gaming could be. Sega's superb franchises and well-rounded variety of genres really set it apart and made it something truly special. I mean, just look at the success of Sonic the Hedgehog as a cultural icon today, with numerous new game releases over the years and the ultra-popular movie series, even decades after it first debuted on the Genesis. So going back to our main question, was the Sega Genesis really as good as I remember it? When I tally up the score from taking this objective look back, I have to say uncategorically and confidently that yes, the Sega Genesis was indeed a console that was ahead of its time and offered groundbreaking tech, with a library of stunning and memorable games. While it fought against the stiff competition from the Super Nintendo, Sega's ability to push the boundaries of gaming made it an undeniable force in the early 1990s console wars.
Remember that?
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Although Sega eventually faltered in the 32-bit era with the failure of the 32X, Saturn, and Dreamcast, the Genesis rightfully earned its place in the halls of gaming history, and its legacy endures through its games and the unforgettable characters it brought to life for our enjoyment. So whether you're lucky enough to own an original, still-functioning Genesis system, or enjoy its games on a re-released Genesis Mini, or if you even dabbled in playing your favorites on emulation, there's never been a better time to answer the question about the Genesis for yourself. And if you didn't have a chance to play it back in the late 80s or early 90s, then go do yourself a favor and make this console your new hobby. Just be sure to thank me later. But that's just what I think. How would you rate the Genesis? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your views. Don't forget to hit that like button and share this video. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. I invite you to subscribe for more feel-good retro gaming content. Alright everyone, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out, reminding you to keep your games old school and enjoy that 16-bit Sega magic. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.